Hello and welcome to this guide for setting up the Dell Equallogic storage array for a lab environment. I have I believe a 5000 model. It's fairly old, set up in the lab here, and we will be configuring it. It uses the triple gigabit Ethernet card controllers, but I am configuring it using the serial link, which is I think the interesting part of this video. Didn't want to install Java 6 for the management interface, so I'm doing this all over the serial cable. Now, note that I said this is for a lab environment. I'm setting up no security and just bypassing a bunch of these features. Think of this as the simplest possible way to set up a single controller and a single storage array without setting up groups, security, access control lists, or anything like that, because this is just in an unsecured network with no physical access to other networks. So the first thing that I did before doing this video was I ran the reset command on it to set it back to factory defaults, and when it's at factory defaults you will be using a default username and password, GRP, oh I'm sorry, got to click in here, GRPADMIN, group admin, for both the username and the password. And you'll see it start to boot up now. And because I just did a full factory reset, it will prompt you for most of the configuration settings that it needs. Look in the video description for a worksheet telling you what you need to choose beforehand and write down beforehand so that all of your settings are correct, and so that you have them all ready when you go through this. I have this all written down for myself, so I will be entering it in here. I'll make a couple of comments on what this is actually used for. First of all, you do want to say, yes, I want to configure the array. I believe the reason that it's saying, yes, right here. So this being an older unit, the battery has not been charged. In fact, it is pretty much dead, so it will keep giving you this warning unless you want to replace it, which wasn't an option for our lab setup, so I'm just going to continue ahead even though the battery is dead on this. Possible data loss, that's fine. I'm willing to live with that. So while we're waiting for the initialization of the array, I'll make note of a couple of things. I said that I have a worksheet which has all of the settings that you need to have prepared ahead of time before running through this wizard. It's divided into two general sections. One is for member information, which you see coming up right now, the member name. That is the individual host or storage controller that you're working with. The second section is going to be group information, which I haven't actually used, but I believe that group refers to when you cluster multiple Equallogic storage arrays together to act as a group. So we will have to configure IP addresses, host names, and passwords for both members and groups. First of all, member information, member name. Make up your own. I'm filling in from my worksheet. And the Ethernet address or interface you can change, but basically you look at which cable is physically plugged in the back. It will be numbered 0 through 2 for the interfaces you're plugged into. And you will be wanting to plug the Ethernet cable into the same controller card or controller unit as you have the serial cable plugged into. In this case, ETH0 is what I have the Ethernet cable plugged into, so we're good. IP address. Netmask, that's good in my case. Default gateway. Now, something to note is you don't actually have to have a default gateway. In my case, the storage network I'm on is physically isolated from everything else. But to make it happy, just put in something for a default gateway. It doesn't have to actually exist. Okay, now on to the group configuration stuff. Again, this is for if you're running multiple controllers, but even if you have just one, you still have to fill in this information. Excuse me. And so it's going to see if the group actually exists already. I suppose this is if you're trying to join an existing group, it will send out some broadcasts and see what responds. But you'll see in a moment here, it will actually come back and say, do you want to create a new one, because we couldn't find the old one. And there we go. We do want to create a new password, or new group. And now it's just checking to make sure that all of the settings are fine. And actually, I have tried to go in afterwards and change these settings, and I couldn't quite figure out how. So do make sure that these settings are correct. I did find the correct command, but it kept failing out with some Netmask thing, but it wouldn't let me ask or enter a Netmask. So I don't know what was up with that. Just make sure this is right the first time. Okay, so password for managing group membership. I believe this is what you would use to add a new controller to the group. And confirm the password. And now this is for the admin account. This is the password that you will be using to log back into the serial console once you have finished configuration and logged out. Okay, and this configuration is about finished. Excellent, so now we're logged in, and you can do the normal question mark to see what's available. And there's quite a few things. Thing to remember is that not all of the commands are available right now. Just like with most network gear, there are different modes that you can go into, and so there's a couple of things that we want to do. The first thing is we want to create an actual volume out of the raw storage that we created. So what we're going to do there, let me look at my notes here quick. Excellent. So what we're going to do there is, first of all, we have to switch the RAID policy. So by default, it sets up as RAID 10, which is fine. I'm going to switch it to RAID 6 because that gives me the capacity versus performance that I need for my use case. So to change the RAID of a member server of a group, you go to member select, but we need to know the name of our member. So actually what you need to do first is member show, and you see that I've got one member named eqstore. So member select, and then you can either just run that eqstore or the name that you provided, and you can either run the commands directly from here. If I hit question mark, it will list out all of the commands available from this mode, or you can hit enter here to go into the mode. I will hit enter. I am now in member configuration mode for the eqstore member. I can list out the commands available, and what I want is the command which sets the RAID level for it, and that command is RAID-policy, and then I'm setting RAID 6. Actually, let's try question mark here quick. Yeah, and it tells you what the different policies available are. RAID 6 is my policy. Excellent. So, just waiting for that to go. And then you can hit exit to come out of the member configuration mode. Next thing you need to do is take the storage that you have available and make it available as a volume. So this command is volume create. You have to name the volume. That's another thing from the worksheet. And in this case, I'm calling it proc store 1. since I'm going to be using this for a Proxmox cluster. You have to specify the size of the volume. In my case, that size is 2.5 terabytes, so 2560 GB for gigabytes. I promise you that's correct. And then that, I believe, is all that you have to do. I do a couple of more commands at the end here. One of them is snap-reserve 0%, and that basically disables the snapshot feature and gives you all of the available space on the volume to use for primary storage cases. I prefer that because I like managing snapshots using my primary virtualization software rather than my storage controller. And then the other thing I do is unrestricted, and I said that there was not going to be much security here. This basically says there's no access control list controlling who is available or who is able to connect to the controller. You could set up an access control list to say only specific hosts could connect to this volume, but we are disabling that. So that's what you need to do to create a volume. And by using the volume show command, I can confirm that a 2.5 terabyte volume called ProxStore1 was created. That's all you really have to do here to get it set up. One thing that I do like to do is set the time zone so that the time is correct. So you do grp params for configuring groups time zone. And my time zone is America/Chicago. And that will make the time work correctly for me. You can also set the time in the same area. And then I'm going to check to see what my information is. So I'm doing member show to show the members of my group, and you see that I have a member called eqstore, and then if you do member show eqstore, it will show more detailed information about that specific member. And I'm going to scroll up a little bit for this. You can see total space, snapshot space, used space, serial number, controllers, disks, and all that good stuff. Warning conditions. And volume is the other thing that you can do. So I'm doing volume show to see what volumes I have available, and then volume show volume name. To see additional details about the volume. And yeah, scroll past where I wanted it to. And there you go. And the interesting thing in the volume name here is that you're given the iSCSI name of your volume, which is very useful when you want to connect to it. So right here you see that ProxStore, well, I can't select just the iSCSI name, but you can see that these three lines here, the IQN between the IQM for the top line here, this random identifier, and then the one at the end of it wrapped over. And that is the iSCSI name that you're going to need to use to connect to this storage device now. And again, I set up no security. I explicitly disabled access control lists, so you're going to be able to connect to this from anything. And that is what you need to do to configure the Dell Equallogic storage array.